morning. Hey, I had my head turned. Monday Methods, Bradley McAllister. Wonderful morning in South Georgia. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope the stream is on. It's a great day. We're going to have some fun today. We're going to do some different things. One thing because I just ran over here, I didn't turn on my Facebook feed. So I'm going to run in the control room real quick and just click on a screen on my computer. Computer number 3, something like that, and expand that to where I can see what's going on. There we go. All right. Now I can see what's going on in the Facebook world. I need to get another computer set up to where I can monitor YouTube attendees coming in. With my systems here, I can see the chat column. So if you chat in Facebook or in YouTube, I see it in a dedicated computer monitor I have over here. I have a dedicated computer monitor here for Facebook. I got another one up there for the cameras and another one over there for the cameras. I need to add another one for the YouTube channel. I've got a spot for it, I think, right up there on the wall. I think I can make it fit. But hey, it's going to be a fun day. Today we're playing with Crazy Grain. Hickory. Brought this home from North Georgia. I was up visiting with my folks over the weekend and earlier, cutting some trees for them and bushes and things around the house and visiting Easter and all that good stuff. Family, it was a great time. I hadn't seen my folks in a while. Steve's in here. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Arthur. Good morning, Facebook user. It's good to see you guys. I got a special treat for you today. It's such a nice day. Do I have everything right here? If I do this right, we're going outside today. We're going to do just a little bit of wood cutting outside because it's such a nice day. This was a last minute thought of mine to run out and hook up a camera outside for cutting this crazy wood and running the chainsaw. I haven't done this before, and of course I decided at like 9:15 that was going to be what I was going to do. So leave it to me to decide to hook up another camera and wires and electronics that I haven't run at the last minute, which is good. Hey, Joe, good morning. Now, I got something else over here popping up. Stuff always jumps up on the screens. So while we're waiting for folks to come in, I'm going to go over and fix a little thing on my chat box. I don't know what this little guy is. It says, close that. I don't want to see it because it's hiding things. Good morning, Mark. Mark's in here. So, yeah, I brought home hickory. My dad picked it up off the side of the road. So this is a roadside kind of event, roadside wood, as we've done before. And it's got crazy, crazy grain. I'll give you a quick shot of it in the overhead here. This is what we're playing with today. Now, for the sake of time, I already have cut one piece and knocked it round and mounted it on a faceplate here. Here's another piece, and this is what we're going to talk about, draw on, and then we'll go out and cut this piece in half. So that's where the outside part of the day comes in, and that'll be not too terribly long from now. And then we'll come back and turn this guy. So I'm really looking forward to it. Now, I may have to turn on my fan. Of course, I did, like I said, I put myself under the 8-ball having to run around a little bit since I decided to add the outdoor camera today. And earlier, it was really nice out there on this shot. The sun was shining on it. It was perfect. It was nice, bright sun on it. It's getting a little shade on it now, but that's okay. Todd Hall, good morning. Good to see you. Let's see. It's 11:05. I might as well just keep right on rolling. So, today, the whole idea is crazy grain, stressed wood, a stressed tree, a tree that didn't grow in a nice flat place, grew on maybe on a hillside or had some other factor that affected how it grew, and so that its growth rings are not nice circles, nice concentric circles. This piece is perfect. It's got everything almost wrong with it, which also kind of makes it kind of cool. As I was cutting things up this morning, and I'm going to pop to the overhead here. As I was cutting on this morning, first thing I discovered was that the pith does not run true to the center, okay? And when I say that, I don't mean that it's not in the center, which it's not in the center, or it wasn't when I started cutting, but it also runs at an angle. So if you have the log, if I had this log up here, you know, like so, and the pith is centered here, the pith is up here on the other end. So the pith is at an angle. This tree is really stressed. It's got everything kind of going wrong for it. But that's what makes it interesting to work with. So as you can see on this end, believe it or not, the pith is pretty well centered up. Now the piece that the end that I showed you in the picture yesterday for posting for here, it had splits and checks and cracks, and that's outside. So I'm going to run and grab that because I had it kind of propped up there just to show you things. Let me grab this, because this piece was showing me all kinds of badness. And I've got my marker, and so we can highlight all the badness. Hopefully you'll be able to see this in the camera in the overhead. Good morning, Wendy. Thank you for dropping in. So when I first got this log, and I brought it home, like I say, yesterday, and I looked at it last night to take the pictures, and the first thing I saw, a couple of areas I want to identify. This one, and this one. That's the pith, that's the center, theoretically. That is probably a limb. You see how this grain goes around it? So that was probably a limb. This was the pith. It's got a little hollow in it. And right in here is another set of rings of their own, completely separate from all the other growth rings. Now, what's really cool about this piece, good morning, Jeff. What's up? We're playing with Crazy Grain. And my dad just popped in, who I got the wood from, and said the tree was growing at a steep angle, which makes perfect sense. So what's cool about this piece of wood, and excuse my drawing, but I'm going to draw on a growth ring for you just so you can kind of see what this thing has done, but also what makes it cool. And I'm going to try and follow a growth ring as close as I can on a particular growth ring, or very close. Somewhere right in there. I might maybe like it in that. That is the pattern. Oop, let me move my headstock a little bit more. I knew this was probably going to happen to me. You know me, I'm always trying to do more things that'll fit into space. That is the profile of the outside of this tree. You can even see it here. That's what the growth ring pattern looks like. Typically, you know, we expect if you want perfect wood, a nice circle, everything is even and all that, clean, clear, straight. This is anything but that. But also the beauty of that is these type of grain patterns, though they're difficult to deal with and can be difficult to cut cleanly because the grain is changing directions. So 2 times right here, 3 times. If this was the grain in a circle, it now goes in, flat, and back up. So your grain orientation is going to vary. You're not going to win, sort of. And it makes it more difficult to turn it easily. The byproduct of that, when you deal with a piece of wood like this, is that, so yes, it's more difficult to turn, and you may have end grain tear out in odd places that you might not normally, things like that. But you get a more unique, or a very unique, I shouldn't say more unique, because who's to judge what is more unique? You get a very unique piece because the grain is crazy, and it's not typical. It's definitely atypical. I love this kind of stuff, and a lot of people run from it because it's not easy. I was going to say it's not fun, but it's fun for me. It's not always easy to work with, and it makes you work for it. It makes you fight it and things like that. But I really like it. So let's see. Just as I love they have all kinds of problems with cracks this year. It's too much humidity and not enough. Yep. And I love that when you turn it, it turns out awesome. Yes, absolutely. So back to my piece here. What are we going to do with this? So what I did is, and now here's what's really wild. So looking at this end, right? That's what I saw when I first looked at the log. And here is the section that I have cut off, and I have just a little another half of this one out there. Now you notice now we have one pith right in the center, and that's about it. And the rings, the growth rings, though they're still undulated, they're not as pronounced as they are. The movement is not as pronounced as it is here, okay? And so that's changing as it goes through the tree. Also, if you look at this end, you'll see that the pith was definitely not in the center. Now, here's the center over here, give or take. Well, now it's pretty much in the center. And I would cut this, and we're going to cut this piece, so I can cut this one differently than I cut this piece over here. And we're going to talk about how to decide where to cut. It all depends on what you want. Now, look at this end. Think about that. Keep a visual in your head. And let's turn this over end for end. And it's only a little bit, it's not very long. And so our pith stayed in the center in this case. Here's the checks. This is the end that has not been cut off at all. Okay? This is what I did. I took this amount right off the end of the log. I wish the log had been just a little bit longer, but everybody cuts them to like firewood length. So when we cut this piece in half, we're going to have some of this because it's a little small to be cutting any more off of. But we still have some crazy grain running around here. But the pith did center up. So this piece we're going to take outside and cut. Now, like I said, this end, I'm not going to worry about this so much, whether I get anything out of this or not. And this is hickory, according to my dad. And I did a little research on it last night, Pop. And I do believe you are correct. It is hickory. It is hard. It is heavy. The bandsaw laughed at it and said, I don't think so. I don't have a big, heavy bandsaw here. And I'll talk about this again outside. This is probably the smallest piece of wood that I would consider putting on the sawhorses outside here with the wood cradle and cutting with a chainsaw. This is really bandsaw size wood. It's getting pretty small to, oh, I was on the wrong picture, sorry. Outside cutting, it's getting pretty small to be using a chainsaw on a piece like this. It's only 9 inches in diameter, and now it's only about 9 inches long. So optimally, I would put this over on a bandsaw. If you have a nice bandsaw or decent enough, again, I took this over to the little one I've got next door. The bigger saw's up north at the shop where I was over the weekend. If you've got a big enough saw that has the power and a good fresh sharp blade, yeah, you could cut this really hard wood. I couldn't do that this morning. It just laughed at it, so I cut these corners with the chainsaw. And I'm not going to show you that because it's a little sketchy. I would say do it with your bandsaw. Cut this on a bandsaw. It's getting pretty small. Okay, so let's see here. Go back to the overhead, and let me check questions. How come you call it the pith and not the cambium layer? Well, the pith is in the center, and the cambium layer is on the very outside. Hope that makes sense. Let's see. So looking at this grain, what do I want to get out of this piece? Now that I don't have any splits, the pith is centered up, I've got a couple of options. If I wanted to make, and I'm going to draw all over this guy. If I wanted to make interesting lidded boxes, let's say, and I don't know how I'm going to keep up track with myself, I would probably I would lay this out to where I might make a real small lidded box. And that would be my blank, my premium blank for a lidded box there. This would be another, I just like the way this grain looks right in here. This would be another, give or take, could be a premium lidded box kind of cut right there. So you would end up cutting this in half here and then cut those pieces out. All right. Now I'm going to do myself a little slash through here so I don't get confused on these. But I think if I wanted to cut bowls out of this, now I have a choice, and I like, let's see, I like this pattern here because the grain, it's close to the center. Let's make this our center line. Regardless of what the grain does down in here, it's going vertical by the time it gets to the center, or very close to vertical.
So that makes for a nice layout for a bowl blank. And this side is a little wavier, a little crazier. So you might want to make this into an interesting natural edge piece. Okay? If we could also cut it this way, but if I did, I would probably orient it about like that. This being the highest point or the longest point. Let me move this over. Here's my pith again. This is which I'm gauging everything off of because we don't want the pith in our piece. So this would be a nice bowl blank here. Got the grain coming up. So we've got a lot of options, and I actually kind of like that one. I think I'm going to strike a line right there. I like this one because of the way the grain works. It would be a fairly steep-sided piece naturally to keep all the grain patterns in it, with still having about our 9-inch top. And if we do that, this side is not bad either. It's kind of a mirror of that side with the wild and crazy grain in it. So I think that that's kind of going to be our motive here. Now, a bigger piece on a bigger log, especially if it was 18, 20 inches in diameter, I would take, like say, let's pretend this, my rule here is a 2x4 or whatever. I would line out that pith area and I would say, box it out. This is what I always do. I'll box it out so I know that I'm not going to utilize that. And I would make 2 cuts. If this piece was bigger, I would make this cut for that bowl blank and I would make this cut for that blank. Now, if the piece was really big, let's say it was a 30-inch log and this was a 2x4 or 2x6, I would lay out multiple lines across here. And if you wanted to make small pieces out of this, you could. All right, you could lay out all the way across this piece. If this thing was like 30 inches in diameter, it'd be making wicked kinds of fun pieces. So all these cuts coming across would be the outer skin. It would still be a blank. This would be a bowl blank. This would be a bowl blank. Blank, blank. Little teeny blank out here. These are what I call project blanks. So they're squares. When I cut this, then I cut that off, and I would box these out on the bandsaw into 2x2s, 3x3s, 4x4s, whatever they work out to be. Steve says, how do I decide how much is pith? That's kind of always a good question, Steve. You can see in the typical tree, sometimes it's very pronounced that it might be this kind of large. You'll see a distinct difference. This one, it seems to be quite small, and because there's not much change in it. And that's one of the things I was trying to study on the different hickories last night, and there's a whole bunch of different hickories out there. And I jumped on the internet after I got home last night, and I jumped on the internet, did some research, and the different hickories actually have uniquely different piths. And so I was kind of curious about, and I don't know which kind of hickory this is. I didn't go that far. I'm not a dendrologist. I wish I knew more about trees and wood species. I've got the books. I haven't studied. I raised my hand. I've been a bad student. So typically, though, Steve, the pith, you're going to often see some radial cracks coming out of the pith. And that kind of helps you determine. So if the radial cracks run out 1 inch or 2 inches or 3 inches, that's kind of where I draw my circle and say, okay, that's the area that's being affected by the pith and it's splitting in a natural state. All right, does that make sense? It depends on the tree. And again, like I say, this tree has run, the pith has run downhill or uphill. It's gone at an angle. It hasn't run straight through the log, okay? So I think, because the next step is to cut this log. Before we go out and cut, when I go out, it's first time for doing anything outside with the chainsaw. It was last minute. I won't have a monitor out there, and I won't be able to see your questions until I come back in. It's just a camera set up out in the yard. So does anybody have any kind of questions? If you do, before I go cut this, regarding cutting it, go ahead and ask now in the chat column. Like I say, because I won't be able to see it out there. I'll be able to see it when I come back, but it's hard for me to scroll it too. So if anybody's got anything you want to pop in there and ask me before I go cut this, let me know. Now I'm going to pop over to the outside camera, and I have a steel chainsaw out there, and this will make it easier for me. I can look at the picture and kind of explain what I've done. I got a steel chainsaw with a 14-inch bar on it. It's my small saw. I've got a set of wooden sawhorses that are, this stuff's been around forever, and they're my big flatwork sawhorses as well. They hold sets of 2x4s. You can put 4x8 sheet on there. So what I've done here is I've taken 2 more 2x4s and I've laid them across the sawhorses, put a screw in each contact point, 1 screw, buried the head, and I set it up to where it holds this particular log pretty well. I say pretty well. This log is not perfectly round. So it holds it fairly secure. Now again, I can't stress enough, this is pushing the limit of what I would cut in this situation with a chainsaw. This piece is getting small. Facebook user, would this work for pen blanks? Sure, especially if we, talking about pen blanks, if you utilized these, they would be great pen blanks. All this could be, but you're going to want to, I think, I'm not a pen turner, so I don't know a ton about pen blanks and what you're looking for as far as grain orientation in a pen blank, I have to honestly admit. I would think that I would kind of quarter things for pen blanks. Again, I don't know, but that would be my first inclination. Again, not being a pen turner, I can't say, oh, this is the way exactly you should do it. I would think you would want to quarter things. So, I mean, I would be cutting my pen blanks here, more quartered, and I could be wrong on that. So if it looks like honey locust, I agree, Art. That's what I kept telling my dad, but when I looked it up, it does kind of spec out to be or not locust. It sure looks like it though, but it also specs out to be hickory. Okay, so let's go to the outside camera. I'm going to run the chainsaw, so you probably won't be able to hear. I hope the chainsaw is not too loud. I hope the auto volume takes care of itself with the chainsaw and all that. So I'm going to carry the piece out, put on my gloves, take out my face mask. I do have on proper shoes. I don't have on chaps, chainsaw chaps. Depends on what your safety level is that you want to deal with. But face protection, gloves, and the saw should fire right up for me, he says. So luckily, and I'll go back in and double check that you can see this. Don't fall down, saw. That sits in the cradle quite nice and secure. All right? And we want to make our cut either here, or we can go just right down the middle because we're going to turn away that. So I'm going to double check that image in the monitor for you. I get my steps in doing this. Okay, yeah, so you can see that. Steve says, or do you have a different storage method? After cutting, are you then sealing the wood you're not immediately using? Steve, yes, I would. If I'm not going to turn it today, I would seal it in anchor seal. Okay? So I wouldn't cut it and not turn it or seal it. Especially this stuff, it's green, it's going to split like crazy if you don't seal it. So my method for storage would be anchor seal. Okay? All right, I'm going to jump back out here. Hopefully the saw fires right up. It doesn't make a fool out of me. If you've been cutting a bunch, make sure you're clear of chunks and debris around where you're working as the chips pile up. And a good thing that I can show you here, here's a good representation, and I think you can see that in this half. Flip my mask up for a second. Here's the pith, about 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom of the cut, right? 9 inches away, the pith is gone. So that's how much it moved in that first section of the piece of wood. Now it's going to make a liar out of me after all. I guess I let it sit too long. So I line up with my mark. And that was quite easy. Now, it is always nice to have your work up here at a height where you can work on it, if you can. If the stuff is big, you end up being down on the ground. But if you can get up here and where you can lift the piece, you're working at a nice, comfortable table height. It works out really well. And that cut nice and smooth and clean, ready to go to the bandsaw and make a nice circle out of it. Okay? So we're just going to leave these. No, actually, I'm going to take these in. I don't want these left out in the sun because they'll start splitting. I'm just going to put them over here in the shade. I hope you like the little difference of being outside. If this works out well, I'll do more of it in the future. Like I say, it was just a last minute idea to go ahead and come out here and show you how to cut. In a safe manner with a nice sawhorse to work with. All right, let's see here. Electric saw. Jim says electric saw. I do have an electric saw, Jim, as a matter of fact. And guys, I got to find my air conditioning now. So I'm going to unplug the heat that I had on this morning before I change the camera around. Good morning. Don's a little late. I'll catch you beginning on YouTube later. No problem, Don. Good to see you. Glad you made it in. We're running Dangerous Tools today and having a lot of fun. Good deal. Good deal. Cool beans. Anybody have any kind of questions about what I did with the saw, how I ran the saw, how I held the saw? Hopefully you were able to see it pretty clearly from the side there. Again, I wasn't worried about myself being in the shot so much. I just wanted to see you be able to see the saw run. And now I need to go change a little switch over here now that we're done outside. I have multiple switchers now. I've always had a bunch of extra switchers. Now I can switch between all the extra cameras. I grabbed another one this morning. So that's cool. We have the end shot now. So here's the end of the piece. Now this has got big, heavy, furrowed bark on it, right? Now, I don't intend to make this a natural edge piece. This is actually the bottom. If I can, I will try and take this bark off first, if it wants to peel off. If not, we'll just turn it away. If I can peel it off easily and it doesn't look like it might come off. It's just less to fly around. Sometimes it wants to come off easy, sometimes it doesn't. I just take a chisel, and if I can pop this off, because it's a mess and you know it's going to fly, and why get hit with it if you don't need to? even if you can just get the big pieces off. I haven't turned any greenwood in forever out here. Again, if you can pop this off, it's just that much less that you have to have flying around. And also the bark, you know, it's got dirt in it, depending on if the piece where it was laying, especially if it came from loggers. If you buy it, get your wood at a log yard, it's definitely been drugged through the dirt and everything else. You have to sacrifice your chainsaw chain a little bit to that, but don't sacrifice your good turning tools to things. Dirt, grit, possibly rocks, all that kind of stuff. So if we can peel the bulk of this off of here, we are better off. You know, you won't get it all, but that's okay. You can try. And it's just old beater chisel. Because I like to say all that stuff is going to fly off and bounce around, maybe hit you. We don't want that. Pops right off nicely. Okay, that's not too bad. Maybe a little bit more there. And I think we'll leave it at that. That'll be all right there. Okay. Good deal. All right, we are on the end camera right now. Let me see. I'm back to my mark. I finally got smart. You know, the more time I do this, so this is about 2 years now into doing live streams, and I'm always learning something. It's an ever-changing little project, depending on if the electronics are going to work right that day, one thing or another. Focus, at least cameras that autofocus, pieces of wood spinning, and moving the headstocks around are out of my budget. I've looked at them. I've got 5 cameras in here, and at $4,000 or $5,000 a piece for the ones that could do what I really need. Well, can't justify that. So I've learned to adjust, and finally I made a mark to where I'd set my headstock earlier today. Just the little things in life that make it a little bit more fun and easier for me to give you the best presentation I can. All right. That being said, because people say I talk too much, but hey, that's who I am. I rough turned this piece just to get it kind of cleaned up. What speed are we turning it at? Don't know. Let's see what we get here. We're looking for vibration, or we want as much speed as we can get without vibration. And I'm going to bring the tailstock up, but I may go ahead and peel this bark away first. With the gouge, and just get that bottom cleaned up, because I'm on a faceplate. So I'm going to wait and watch for a second and see. I'm going to go to the end camera, and I want to see if that is vibrating in your world. That's right at about 1,000 RPMs, and if the camera isn't shaking the room too much, I'll know here in just a second. Okay, that's not bad. That looks pretty good. So that's a nice good speed. That's a nice clean, fast speed, about 1,000 RPMs. Okay. I'm so happy that when I built the control room, I moved the computer stuff out of here, so at least the chips and the chunks and all don't hit the computers. So what I have today, this is a Carter & Son 5/8 bowl gouge, and this is what is going to be my main tool on this project, I do believe. I did actually sharpen it. Again, this wood is really hard. I was amazed at how hard it was. So let's get in here and just kind of start to clean this up. I'm just going to use the tip of the tool and draw right across the bottom. I'm not trying to be in a hurry. I want to take my time, and we're going to stop a lot and take a look at things and see what it looks like and what our grain is looking like. Okay, so we still got bark to go there. Now we know we're going to put a tenon on here, so I might come back. Start to flatten that out a little bit. Just establish where our tenon will go in that general area. Now you can see here that we still are not perfectly round on here. I could come out to the side and attack it, but I'm just going to come around the corner with the tool rest from the back. That way I'm cutting in the right direction. I'm cutting downhill of the grain for the most part. Remember, our grain does some crazy things. Also, notice here, that was the pith there, so we'll be taking that out. And you can see how this grain changes and goes back around. There's one of the swirls. This going to make this kind of interesting. What's the difference between a bull and a regular gouge? Art says he still thinks it's honey locust. Doesn't smell like locust, Art. But, you know, I'm not going to argue. There's a bowl gouge and a regular gouge. Well, there are bowl gouges and there are spindle gouges. That's the two main categories. So the difference would be a bowl gouge has a very deep, which camera am I on? Has a very deep flute for moving a lot of material. Whereas your spindle gouge, see where I hid one. I know I have one in the vicinity here, somewhere close by, or not too terribly far away. Let me grab one over here. Your spindle gouge has a very shallow flute and a very wide profile on the nose. I can see if I can get that to where you can see how wide the profile is. I can put my finger in that, and you might be able to see better on the end. Let me see here. No, pretty much like this. So this has a big, think of this as like a big smiley face here. All right, whereas our bowl gouge has much more vertical sides in the flute and much deeper. Okay, that's the quick difference. Okay, so let's continue on here. Come around the corner with this. My tool rest might be just a fuzz high for what I really want. I'm going to drop it down. This tool rest I have to drop all the way down often. A little bit more flat to get out of there. Okay, and you'll notice you can see that right here on the back side. It's a bevel rubbing cut, a push cut with a bevel rubbing. The camera's a little over to the back side of this to show it really well, but I'm not coming in with the bevel with the tool cutting like this. That would catch. Okay. Change it to the end camera. Now, some of this bouncing that we're starting to get is because we have grain going in lots of crazy directions. And especially we've also got right here a little knot has shown up. Okay, so when we get to this knot, which makes the cool grain around it, that little knot area is harder than the rest of it. The wood's already hard as a rock as it is, so we get some bounce in the tool. You've been seeing the tool bounce up in here. And one way to alleviate that is, we were talking about the bevel rubbing, is that if we let the bevel just kind of float, don't let the heel actually touch or drag. The bounce is not so bad. And sometimes you have to hunt around for that perfect angle. See, I decided to put a little rim on this maybe. And as I make that cut, if you can see here, when I come up around the corner, watch, that bevel is not touching at all. All right, so that goes kind of against the bevel rubbing, but if I drag that, it'll make a mark. Now this is green and it's going to move and all that. But let me make this cut. I'll come on up through here again. Trying to find the sweet spot now. There we go. Got my tool quite far down. Let me show you here. You can see how far down I've got the tool handle dropped. Pretty far down for this cut. And then as I come around, I'm just using the tip of the tool. The bevel is not even close to touching there. Okay? All right, it goes against the rule of bevel rubbing, but it works for you. Okay, so let's flatten up this top. All right, this top is a little bit of a mess. We can just come in here with our bowl gouge on the other side, and we can do a little draw cut. We want to know where the top of this is, so we can see what we're working with. So I'm just going to use the wing of the tool. I don't have to worry about the inside so much, just this outer edge. And now that I've got the extra camera wires out, I'm going to go ahead and hook up camera 4 that can come over to this side. I've been talking about it forever, so that you can see this side of things, because I don't have that shot for you yet. Let's take a look and see how that looks. Okay. Interesting, sorry, didn't change camera. Interesting bark inclusion. That's what that was, a limb with bark at some point in the tree's life. Makes for a great little grain pattern right there too, though. A couple of other spots of that nature. So let's come back around to the back here in the bottom. Let's establish our tenon and refine our shape. Okay. Let's go to the end camera. We're going to put kind of a big bottom on this one, so we're going to go with 3.5 inch jaws. One of the reasons I'm doing that is I want a larger tenon for a little more strength. Not that the wood is not strong. The wood is quite strong, but with the grain, if I was to get a catch on the inside with some of the great crazy grain pattern, that's going to make it possibly break a really small tenon. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and the shape of this piece is kind of going to have a wide bottom anyway. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up for a larger tenon. Now here's how I like to do things with my calipers, and look at that. It's almost exactly what I wanted, and I didn't measure. I'm just lucky today, all right? I'm just lucky. That's pretty much the size of the tenon I want, right to those marks I made. So I can start with my big gouge and then switch over to make my tenon. I always like to use my little gouges, but I can start to define the tenon. Double check my size is where I want it. I like to use the carbide tools now. They make it so easy. So if I switch over to carbide tools for making my tenon, if you have them, I'm going to do both things here. So I'll use carbide tool and I'll use a 1/4 inch bowl gouge. The reason I like to use the carbide tools, especially I'm using the Easy Chuck today, the Easywood Tools chuck. So this cutter, the CI2 cutter, perfectly matches the length or the depth of the jaws. This is why I'll show you here why I do it. See how I can line that up. So that cutter is the perfect match to not have to measure for my tenon length. All right, it's like an automatic gauge. Okay. Since the cutter's square, that's what lets me know that I have the right size tenon, length-wise. Check with my, I'm happy, there. Now, with this square tool, if it doesn't like to cut going straight in very well, I just step over to the side and come across laterally. Okay, standard stuff. I want to make sure the bottom of my tenon is slightly concave. So that's how I would do it with my carbide tool, if that's what I'm working with. If I'm working with bowl gouges, if I have all conventional tools, I'm going to take a little 1/4 inch bowl gouge. This is just me. It's my preference. Doesn't mean it's the way you need to go. Lower that tool rest just a fuzz. Mark the center in case you need to recenter it sometime in the future for a return. Now to check that it's slightly concave, I just put my tool across it and make sure that you can see a little bit of daylight. If I can clear the chips out of there, and the camera's just a little out of sight there, but you can see a little bit of daylight right there. So I can also use the same 1/4 inch gouge, and I can continue my cut in here again. This is some gnarly grain in here. Let's see what the bottom of that looks like. All right. So with my square tool, do I have the right length? See, that's why it's so easy to check it with that. And I have exactly the right length. So now I just need to dovetail it. Because I have dovetail jaws, I can dovetail it with my bowl gouge or a detail tool. Got a 10-degree dovetail, so that was using a bowl gouge, quite easy. The other way would be I would come in with a Easywood tools or any of the diamond type tools and just cut my dovetail profile like so. As with always, we want to make sure we have a nice flat section center or flat base right here for the piece to sit on. Now let's go ahead and refine this outside shape. We now know where our top is and our bottom right there. So let's give this a little more profile. Let's see, Steve says tenon with the jaws closing from the outside versus mortise with the jaws spreading from the inside. Any advantages or disadvantages using either? Great topic, great question. Comes up a lot. Here's my take on tenons versus recesses or mortises. For me, it's a personal preference that I prefer to use a tenon. A lot of people prefer to use a recess. They both have their pros and cons. With a tenon, in my mind, when I use a tenon, I have extra wood on the end of the piece. So I'll pop into the overhead here. Let's say I make a mistake on the inside and I cut too deep, right? I have a little extra wood left over on the outside to compensate for that. But by the same token, if I have wood and a tenon that is not super strong, this tenon can snap. And if we snap the tenon off, then we have to cut another tenon and we lose the wood. Our piece gets shorter and smaller. If we put a recess here, as long as you leave enough material outside of the recess that when you expand the jaws, it doesn't snap the wood. What you have to be careful of, and I'll come up here, if you've got the bottom of your piece and you make a recess, and you cut too much wood away and make a profile that there's not much wood between the edge of the jaws and where it goes up, as you expand those jaws, you can snap that little decorative curve that you've got there and break the wood that way. So that's kind of the downside if you use them that way. They're handy. I mean, the recess is great if you don't want to come back and take the tenon off. I've just always liked a tenon. It's just me. There are times when I do use it. I don't use it very much. Some people use it almost exclusively. So I think people find the method that works best for them, they're most comfortable with. And then there are times when it's the best choice to have a recess. There's other times when I actually use the tenon as my base. When it's all said and done, I'll come back and use that tenon for a base to lift the piece up, to give it a little more lift, to say off the table or something like that. So my gripping point becomes part of the piece in the end. Again, if you're using a tenon, you want to make sure that the wood is clean. So there's no voids in here. There's no cracks, no splits, no knot holes. This is a nice solid piece of wood. Okay. I have had trouble, like say, with poplar and super straight grain running through a tenon that they might snap off sometimes. Okay, so it's mostly, in my mind, and some people might have a different opinion, personal preference on whether you use a tenon or a recess. Okay, again, there's a lot of different theories and ideas, and nobody's wrong. If it's what works for you, if it's what works the best for you, then that's the way you should go. I hope that covered that. If you got any more questions, just fire it in the column there, and I'd be happy to answer. Okay, so let's put a little more shape to this guy here. And then I go back into, let's say, the overhead probably. Put my goggles back on. I think I might grab a quick sip of water. So turning this so far hasn't been overly horrendous. Again, we've got an inclusion there. I say that, and I watch it really want to fight me, and then it'll be interesting to see what happens when we go inside. But let's change this profile a little bit. Oh, Steve, absolutely. That's what I'm here for. Never hesitate, guys and gals, to ask a question, okay? I'm going to tell you what works for me and why I do it. I'm not going to tell you that it's the best way, the only way, or anything like that, because there are so many ways to do any of this wood turning. And I'm a firm believer in you need to find what works best for you, whether it's what tool brand, what tool style, what tool steel, what your bevels are, on and on and on. Find what works best for you. And let's go back to the end camera here first. And I think I want to drop that down a little bit more. And again, I think I'm going to leave a healthy bottom on this. And realistically, let me show you here. If you can see this in the overhead, my bevel really isn't quite touching. I know the camera's a little off. If it was back a little bit, it would be better. Let me see if I can't move this. I don't know what will happen to the focus on the end, but I want you to see this. I'll move it back. I've got the spot marked. So when I'm making this cut, if you can see here, and this goes against what we think and we're told we should do, and we should support the cut. Don't get me wrong, you should support the cut. But when I'm making this cut, you can see the bevel in here is not going to even touch. And it's not giving me any trouble, because I can't, for me to get the bevel, I have to come all the way over here. Now I can do that, but it was a little farther to reach up against the tenon. So the fact that the bevel has to rub all the time is not necessarily the case. Now it is riskier. Now as I cut comes in, then it starts to go ahead and pick up the cut and rub and support. And it was making a little noise there, so I went ahead and backed off on the depth of the cut. This wood is quite hard. Quite hard. So it's interesting that all the character is in the vertical. All right. When we roll over here, we kind of lose some of the character. So I don't think I want to do that too much. As a matter of fact, I'm going to try something a little different here. I'm actually going to cut this back in, and I'm going to go fairly deep. Let's see what happens here. I'm just going to. This is wood to experiment for me. And I'm going to cut the wrong way for a minute, if it'll let me. It won't let me. Now I want to see if I can add some of that character back in here, and I may not be able to. So yeah, so we picked some of that character back up by changing the profile. All right. Now, you know, it's a little bit of a funky shape, but hey, I'm known for my funky shapes. I get a lot of grief from my funky shapes. But looking at the piece, you can see the side grain here, and you can see it here, which opens some of that up. When that was rounded over, you didn't get quite as much of the interesting grain showing up. It kind of changed the way it looks. Okay. So let me think about how do I want to refine this. I need to refine this a little bit. Not much. Let's try something for fun here. We've been working with the high-speed steel tools. Let's take a round carbide style tool, Easywood tools, the mid-size finisher, the CI3 cutter. Looks like I freshly sharpened this one recently on a diamond card. And let's see what happens to this grain. So right now, nowhere do I have any torn grain. All right, I mean, even though I've got some bounces from the tool, from the crazy grain, I don't have any torn end grain at all, which is really nice. And now that tool was freshly sharpened. And I like these round tools because I now have this profile. And I'm going to move this back over now. Let me get this back up underneath the camera for you. Doug Dixon. How you doing, buddy? Hey, I just grabbed the finisher to show the finisher. You popped in at just the right time, because I love the round cutter on the finisher for sculpting style work. And so this piece to me is now kind of a sculpted piece. Okay? And so it makes it much easier to make these flowing curves. I'll just check here. And I'm going to dial my speed up a little bit more. This is nice and steady. The faster I can spin this, I'm going to take this up to about 1500. And hopefully nothing's shaking. Get some of that out of the way so you can see the contour a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to leave that section alone, and actually I may clean that up. I see right there I need to flatten that out. It's got a little angle to it. And since the sales manager from Easywood Tools is here, I'll use Easywood Tools as a little detail tool. I just want to flatten up that shoulder for the jaws to rest against. It had a little bit of uphill to it, and I didn't want that. Okay, now let's go sculpting out here. These tools are fantastic for sculpting. Now you see how I make it a very light cut though? I'm going to actually lift that mask up so you can hear me better. Very, very light, fine cut. Because I've already got my basic shape in place. And I'm just refining that now. I'm going to get rid of that hard line right there. Okay. Now let's go to the end cut. I'll show you that same cut from the end. And the beauty of these round cutters is I can cut all the way around the cutter. So it doesn't matter what angle the tool is coming at the piece from. And I do think I want to take a little bit of this right here away. I want to take away a little more wood just to make a little nicer profile right in here. Looked a little clunky right there. And right on up to the top, I'm going to take that sharp rim. Right now I've got a really sharp rim there, which would cut me and or break eventually anyway. So we'll take a little bit of that away. Now let's see how she looks. Okay. Little hump right in here, and I got that knot. So I want to refine this section right in here just a little teeny bit more. If I pop you in the overhead, you can see what I'm talking about. I mean, it's not bad per se. Everybody has their own opinion of what something should look like, shape-wise. All right, just a little more change right here to make me happy. And I'm actually trying to look out here at the back side of things. Now granted, this piece is green and it's going to move. But I'm still pretending like, you know, I'm making my finish cuts. One of the things I love to do is, especially if you're just getting started, turning, and you haven't been turning real long, even if you have, I practice on my roughing. So when I'm roughing something out, I practice making my finish cuts. It really helps you. I mean, it's wood that you're throwing away, okay? Because when it comes time to make that finish cut that's got to be as nice and smooth and clean as you can get it, you can't practice. It's too late. You're already there. You're already down to what's your shape. All this wood that we've been throwing away, if you're not in a hurry to get the thing out, if you're not doing production and you don't have to rush, pretend like every cut, until you get tired of going so slow, is a finish cut. And when it comes time for that finish cut, you'll be that much better. I'm a firm believer in that. And I do it all the time. If I'm feeling rusty and I'm only out here a day, maybe 2 days a week, depending on what's going on, I don't have a tool in my hand every day, all day, like I used to. So I'll practice along the way in my rough stuff, and I get the rust in the rough stuff and get the rust off. Say that fast 5 times. So that's how I stay tuned up. All right, I'm happy with this. It's an interesting shape, but I'm going to leave it just like that. And let's go ahead and turn this thing around, put it into the chuck. We'll let the debate rage as to whether it's hickory or locust. Art's convinced that it's locust. My dad and I were on the hickory camp. So these are number 10 screws. I put this in before you were here. These are number 10 screws with a square drive. It might look like Phillips from overhead, but they're not. A Phillips would work. These are Spax screws. Okay. And grab our chuck and pop her on. Any reason why I don't use a worm screw? Not really, Don. This piece of wood could have easily worked with a worm screw. Would have been a perfectly fine choice. No reason not to. This wood is nice and hard and strong. Worm screw would have been fine. My chuck was just sitting here and the jaw is already in it, and I would have to change the jaws to put the worm screw in. But no, the worm screw would be fine. Absolutely. There's no reason not to. Again, it comes down to preference. I like a faceplate oftentimes, and I'm kind of used to using a faceplate more than a worm screw. But no, there's no reason why you couldn't have used a worm screw, none whatsoever. All right? Just depends on what you're into. So, let's see if this, I may change jaws here. Yeah, I'm going to change to the regular jaws, regular 3.5-inch jaws. They have the deeper profile that I cut the tendon for. It takes all of 30 seconds to change the jaws, and I'm not even hurrying. Now, my chuck is a working chuck. If you look at this chuck, you'll see, since Doug is here, I'll make sure he's aware. Doug, your chuck gets used heavily. It's got dye on it. It's got lacquer on it. Hey, it still keeps right on running. Does a good job. Okay. And in the overhead, so here's this gap. This is all important gap. We'll come up to here. We want it close to a perfect circle, especially if you're new. Let me describe this. The outer band here, or the inner band of your jaws, when they are essentially closed all the way down, that is a perfect circle. That's all the contact you can possibly get. Well, you want to have a little bit of margin for error. So that's why I cut my tendons just a little bit larger. And what you want, I like to go for about 1/8 of an inch. Right there. And so that's real close to having a perfect gap without running the risk of having the jaws touch. If the jaws touch, well, then I have to either return the tendon, change the jaws, or something of that nature. Okay? So that I hand turn it, spin it by hand, make sure it's not crooked or anything. That sits in there real nice. The jaws are sitting right on here very, very well. Nothing wasted. If I wanted to come and cut in here again, I could. So that worked out perfect. That's a nice strong hold for this piece. Okay. Now this wood is really hard and really dense, so it's not going to compress much. Oftentimes, if you follow me a lot, you'll see that some of the woods I'm using are softer. The maples, the poplars, or some punky wood. I turn a lot of spalted wood that I've got around, and I will tighten the chuck up, and then I'll talk to you for 30 seconds, and then I'll tighten it again, and then I'll tell another lie for 30 seconds and tighten it again. That's because I want to make sure that those soft fibers have crushed all the way in. This wood is hard as a rock. It's super dense. It's not going anywhere. I'm certain that now that I've been talking to you, see, that didn't move. It's not going to move at all. Okay? Something... I think I have a visitor in the studio. There's been some birds that have flown in through here. I got a few gaps still to fill in. All right, let's go to the top side, inside. Clean this out. Start going there. Now here's the deal. This piece of wood is green, right? So theoretically, I should leave it extra thick. This piece is only about 8 inches in diameter now, I'm guessing, now that I've turned on it. I don't know, there's my tape measure over here. 10% of the diameter, if we want to return this, yeah, it's right about 8 inches. So we would want to leave, half an inch or so. I think because of the nature of this wood, with the crazy grain in it, I'm going to leave a little extra. This thing may move, and I'm hoping it doesn't split. I'll put it in a paper bag, which I haven't addressed, which I was going to get to anyway. This will go in a paper bag so that it dries evenly and smoothly and uniformly. If I turned it to its finished thickness, then we'd have a warped bowl, which there's nothing wrong with that if you like wobbly bowls. And being that this is a crazy grain bowl, sometimes that's advantageous. With the crazy grains, it's going to move different, and it's going to twist and warp, and you get some pretty cool pieces. So, what did I hit? I hit 4. Oh, I see what's going on. Don't mind me. I'm just losing my mind. Make different styles. Make bowls that are perfectly smooth, round, proportions, all that. And turn some green wood, turn it thin to whatever your finish is, and let it warp. Let that guy just go crazy, right? And then you might return the bottom so that it sits flat. You don't want it wobbling on the table. But let the piece have some natural character to it that you couldn't or didn't cut or carve. So crazy grain wood oftentimes will give you that movement that you wouldn't otherwise get in a nice, clean, straight grain, perfect piece of wood. And so that's one of the ways to utilize it. Some of these other pieces, I'll do that. I'll turn it super thin and just let it do its thing, and it'll be cool in its own way. So when you have a log, cut it in half if you only had enough for one half. Make one that's all symmetrical and one that's goofy, and you get the best of both worlds. Oh, and there's something else that just popped in my brain. I was going to say, if I didn't mention it earlier when I was cutting outside, the piece that I cut off, I want to say this again real quick. I cut close to 3 inches off of that log, right? The log was only like 16 inches long. I didn't know how long it had been out. It's got cracks in the end. So be sure and get rid of plenty of wood off the ends of short pieces. When you get short pieces of wood, when you find it on the side of the road like this was, and it's 16 inches long, you don't know how far in those cracks have gone. One of the biggest reasons our pieces crack, and crazy grain wood is even more susceptible to cracking. Make sure you've cut off all the wood that's already split. Okay? So in this case, I sacrificed basically a 16-inch log to get 1 or 2 8-inch blanks or even smaller. All right? The piece was actually longer than 16. But be sure you cut plenty of wood off the end so that none of these cracks that are in here, none of this stuff that's radiating in is going to end up in your piece. All right? Real important, because it's really frustrating to have turned it all, done all that work, and then have it split because it's already split. And it'll split while you're turning it. Okay? All right. Enough of that. Let's go inside. See how she does on the inside here today. Should be interesting. Hopefully it's not a battle. We'll find out. I'm going to go back to the same bowl gouge I started with earlier. The Carter & Son Toolworks tools, they do stay sharp a long time. It won't stay sharp forever, but they stay sharp a long time. I'm not doing finish turning. If I was, I would go resharpen it. First I have to figure out where I laid it again. There it is. I'm going to drop that tool rest down. This one oftentimes I can drop all the way down. It's got a real tall post on it. Okay. So 1,000 RPMs, 1,200. It's turning nice and smooth. If I pop you in the overhead, you'll see there's no vibration, no shimmy, no shake. So it's pretty good. The faster we can turn this wood, the cleaner and easier it's going to cut. So I'm just going to come and draw across the face here. I do need to raise that up actually a touch. It was a little bit low. Just clean this up. Little draw cut with the wing of the tool. Now the thing that always kills you is to throw away all this nice wood in the middle. You know? That's why you could core, you know, coring is good. Now what do we have here? Here's some things that are going to give us trouble in our crazy piece of wood. So this knot we're probably not going to have to deal with. But see this little guy that's shown up here? If you can't see it, where did I put my marker that I was drawing with earlier? I'm going to highlight this for you. Right there is a knot, and in and of its own accord. Otherwise, the grain coming through is pretty straight. But this little guy is going to fight. It's going to make noise. It's going to make the tool bounce. This in the rim will. We don't know how far in this piece goes. We'll find out. Okay. It's a pretty piece of wood. All right. So, do we turn the bowl, cut the bowl away from the outside in, inside out? You can go either way. Different people have different preferences. A lot of times we'll start in the center. Still a little low. I kept saying I need to lower that, but today it needs to be up. Sometimes you want to, some folks like to, I'm going to move my controller or I'll lean on it. Like to start in the center and keep working their way out. Like so. Some folks like to start on the outside. One thing I like to do for especially a piece like this is I want to establish that wall thickness that I've said I'm going to leave and to return. So I like to come in with my tool and say, okay, that's the wall thickness I want to leave because I don't know how much this is going to move. Okay. Now that this knot is actually, this is interesting as we see, we come in, this is kind of part of this. Interesting little scenario developed there. So some people will work their way this way. And the approach is different because this is green. Let me stop for a second, and I'll explain to you something I want to say. So if this was a dry blank of wood, I would work some of the center out, then I would start working my way down from the outside in sections, and that's how I'll finish turn it. Because once it's dried and it's been warped, and you return it and you get it round, then as you cut it thinner and thinner, as you release more stresses in the wood, this wood is horribly stressed. It means it's going to move a bunch more than likely. So work your way down the insides in steps. When it's dry, and in the case of it being green, we're not worried about it. But when it's dry, we want to work down, say, inch and a half steps, and get it just where we want it. Because the next time that we take the next inch and a half out, that upper section is probably going to move a little bit, not a lot. But if you go back up there with your tool, it'll you'll hear your tool bounce. It'll go tick 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 tick. You go, oh, I didn't quite get it round. Well, you did, but then when you cut some more wood out and you took the wood away and released the tension and the stress of the wood, well, that upper section moved a little bit. Just leave it alone. Nobody will ever see that. Nobody can tell that it's out by 128th, okay, or whatever it might be. Nobody's going to know. Leave it alone and work your way down in steps. Let's see. Doug's got a bias. Let me read back up here. Doug says, my suggestion, use the Easy Wood Tool Carbide to get through the knot. Yep. I'm not biased. Well, no, you're not biased. You're just opinionated, Doug. Either tool, and I'm going to switch back and forth. I always do. I'm starting with the bowl gouge. I'm going to switch over to the carbide tool as well, okay? Because I don't play favorites. I love to show all the different tools because not everybody has everything. End tool, end camera. That's what I want. Dad says he likes the wild shapes. Well, then you got the right son, Dad. of it's some, I mean, it's green and it's some kind of hard. You can hear a little bit of vibration, so I'm not taking a real heavy cut. Sounds like a knot. Yep, so there's a new knot there. Maybe that's the same one, but we're getting a great pattern showing up here. I'd like to just stop right there with that pattern. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully this pattern will still be in play when we get to the bottom. That is really nice. It's really cool. With this grain, this varied grain kind of thing, sometimes you see how this is doing just really strange stuff, especially around the knot. Sometimes you actually have to play with your tool, adjust your angles, and you may not be able to stay at a consistent angle. So if the tool isn't cutting, it starts cutting nicely and then it stops cutting as well. Just adjust up or down just a little teeny bit, roll a little more or less flute, cut in, and look for that sweet spot. When you find that sweet spot, keep right on rolling along until it doesn't work, and then adjust again. Let's take a couple more cuts with the bowl gouge, and I want to go ahead and get this wall set here. So as you can see, my tool is starting to reach further and further over. So to cut this wall, I'm having to come, that's to get my bevel to rub. My tool is at that angle now. All right, so it's way over the machine. It's actually hitting stuff out here on my table that I haven't put away. And I'm a little big, so I'm going to come back out here. That's where I said I wanted my rim wall thickness to be. And so as I'm making this cut, let me go to the end camera. As I'm making this cut, I'm watching over here on this side. I can't really see what's happening here, but I can see the cut line on that side. So as I make this cut, I'm looking across the bowl. Hey, look, another little knot right down in there. Craziness. And sometimes if it fights you one way, come the other way. Don't be afraid to try different directions. Okay, start with the tip of the tool, a little bit of wing. I've got my tool handle down. I'll show you here. So tool handles drop down, tip comes in right to the very center of the wood. And I'm just drawing the tool back out. And now I'm not getting nearly as much fight from that knot. It's not giving me nearly the hard time. And again, I'm using my whole body. I'm just kind of moving my whole body here. So always be looking for, again, like a sweet spot. Then I can come back around. Okay? Now, let's take that carbide tool and put it into that knot, because that knot's getting bigger. So this will keep Mr. Doug happy. And Jim Brinkman. So yes, Jim, we're going to the EWT round cutter right here. Ask and you shall receive. I'm always happy to provide the tool that people want to see. Right, Jim? I hope you're doing well down in Texas, Jim. Can't wait for SWAT. I got the word the other day that SWAT's coming. We're going. We get to register in May. I am all about it. It's going to be great. I love going to SWAT. Super fun. All right, back inside the hole here. Make sure I'm cutting to center. I'm a little bit low. Move my tool rest in. I like the mid-size tools. That's me. Mid-size. I've got the full size as well. Again, a lot of people, it's personal preference. I prefer a mid over a full. Just me. Other folks I know like the full size. This is the one I want to hold all day long. There's a lot of personal preference in wood turning. Absolutely. Yes, Doug, SWAT is a go. Be there with bells and whistles. All right. Hey, that's the wrong one. That's a negative rake. That's what happens when you have tools. I'm lucky that I have a tool with a different cutter. So with the round style cutter, I can just come right down the wall. What's nice about this, I can cut with the left-hand side of the cutter, and then as I come around the bottom of the bowl, I just sweep over onto the tip, and the tool never changes orientation. Let me show you in the overhead. Watch this. The tool never has to change. The tool is going straight in right now, and never changes. Okay, and so just a fuzz low, so I'm going to raise that tool rest up. So that's one of the beauties of these round style cutters, is it never has to change orientation. The cutter doesn't care where you're at, and that was the overhead. So let's go back to the end. And again, another thing you can do with the carbide round cutter, you can start in the middle and basically drill a hole. And this is what I'll do if I want to establish where I'm going to go to in the very end. Because I'm getting close to the bottom here now. So let's say I establish my depth, which I'm getting pretty close. What we're after here is a uniform wall thickness. I'll grab a little set of calipers here. And you can see there, what do we got here? I just stick my finger in there, so that's my index finger thickness. And as I come down, it's still bigger. But that's the easiest way to do it without having to hold a tape measure, especially in the rough stuff. You know, this is big. Check that wall thickness, but we want this to be uniform all the way down. And the same goes for the bottom of my piece. I tend to leave a little extra in the bottom of my pieces, just for a little extra weight and stability in them. But I'm getting pretty close here, and you know, you can do different things to figure out just how far you are. You know, you can do this, and so I've got a little bit more to go, but not a lot. If I show you in the overhead, this is the quick and easy way. You line up your thumb with the rim, and then you stick it up top, and you go, okay, so my cutter is to right there. So I need to maybe take another ½ inch out at the most, out of the bottom here. So I would drill down right here, say maybe another ½ inch. Okay, and that establishes where you're going to. Okay, probably one more pass. Okay, get rid of the nub. So now I have my bottom depth established. And all I need to do is connect that point to this with a uniform wall thickness through my profile. So what I'm going to do now, and the best way I can try and explain this, is as I'm turning the piece, I'm gonna look over the side as I'm turning with the tool, and I'll watch the tool, and then I'll stop and I'll just feel it with my fingers with it running. Be careful, but your fingers don't tell lies. This is pretty good. But I'll just be watching this outside profile and watching the tool move, and I can see what's going on. So in the overhead, the tool starts here, and without a laser, I can see the tools moved to the inside, and I can see how thick that is. So I know I need to take excess out. So just looking over the top really helps, if that makes sense. So we're just working our way right down through here. We have to keep in mind that we have a curve here on the backside on where it goes in. Now another thing that I do a little different that I want to show you with my carbide tools than a lot of people, again, is just what developed for me. When I'm holding the tool, it's got this nice handle built back here, but I don't use it. That goes under my arm, and I'm not suggesting that you do this, but it's what works for me in case you wonder how I'm holding the tool. And so I have my whole shoulder and my arm, elbow is leverage on that tool. And so up here at the front, I just have 3 fingers holding the tool down. Okay? I'll do that one more time from the end. Now see, these fingers are they're just sitting on top of it, pressing down. Okay, let's see how that's looking. Checking the thickness with my finger. I'm still a little thick right here. Just a little teeny bit, okay? So I'm taking just a fuzz more out of there. And then I think we'll call that good. Just a touch more. Let's see. SWAT, 3 feet apart and masks. Okay. That works. We'll just get a bigger booth. Oh, that's right. The trade show, the hall is only so big. I know Spidercraft has a big booth. We're right there by the food line. We're 20 by 20 on an end cap. We have a great location. We have a lot of fun at SWAT. So just right down in here, where I had a little extra material. Okay, now let's say that I didn't have any carbide tools, but I had my conventional tools. Making a sweep across the bottom can be difficult with your standard gouge, and crazy wood or not, when you try and come around the corner here, you tend to drag the heel. Now a lot of people make a bottom feeder, as they call it, out of their bigger tools. I use a smaller one. I just have a little 1/4-inch tool. It's just what I've used for years, and this has a very short bevel, and the heel's ground away, and it's more of a traditional grind. I know I'm not super close there. You can never see it up close because it's so small. But what it lets me do is when I come around this corner, I can make a nice clean cut and come right across the bottom and never drag the heel. So it allows me to make that turn real nice and easy. And if I wanted to blend this in up top, I can actually come way over here with the tool. And I'll show you in overhead how much angle we have on the tool to do this. Again, I'm going to look at the opposite side. Okay, now I'll do that from the end camera as well. I'll come in and pick up the cut and then we'll come back and do it again. Alright, so I'll come back up to the top. You can make a short bottom feeder style tool out of a larger tool. And you see I get a little vibration because I'm about an inch over the tool rest right there. So it makes it real easy to come around and make that turn. Now if I wanted to deal with that vibration, I would actually just adjust my tool rest, or you can use a curved tool rest if you want to. But if I move my tool rest in a little bit closer there, is 2 fuzzy really times 2, or is it a log scale? How much is a fuzz? You know, it's about that much. More than a smidge, less than a smidgen. So right in the transition, for whatever reason, right in here, where the grain is definitely going a lot of different directions, that's where the tool had the most difficulty cooperating, and where I had to adjust the angle, if you will, or tune it just a little teeny bit. So as I was coming along, it started wanting to bounce or vibrate, and I would just rotate or change the angle of the tool ever so slightly until it started cutting nicely again. And then it was all good. So sometimes you have to twist and juke and jive and adjust. Having a short bevel, the common term now is a bottom feeder, works great. It really lets you come across the bottom, and there's no reason you can't. I mean, Carter & Son has one in a 5/8 and a Mike Mahoney, I think, in a 3/4. So you can reach way over the tool rest with them if you want to. Things like that. So this piece, it looks fantastic. It looks cool. Give you another shot down inside there from the end. All right. It didn't fight as much as I expected. Now, one thing I see right here, because this wood is green and maybe because it had been out there too long, right here, and you probably won't be able to see it. So the piece is already split, okay? Which is so if it did split when dry, y'all can do the acrylic patch magic. That's correct, Facebook user, because it just split. right, where did I find it? Right here. There's a split right here. And if I go up to the top, if I put you on the top, right here is a split. All right. And I'll bet you if I was to pour some CA glue right there, you'd see it run in. Now that split may have already been there. And this is the downside of using shorter wood. Remember, I already cut 3 inches off of it. That split might have already been in the piece when I started turning it. Okay. Now when this dries, that's definitely, I'd say definitely going to open up. It may not, but they almost always do. Let's look around here and see if there's any more rearing or ugly head. It also doesn't help that I've got a fan blowing on it, drying it out. These are not splits. Not sure what they are. But that one right there, I don't know if that's the same one I saw earlier. Yeah. So I see a glue handy. Let's see here. If I can show you, I bet you it runs right in there. I'm not worried about the finish on this or anything. Let's see if it runs right in that crack. We're on the overhead. Here's the crack. You can see it show up there. Hopefully by the time I see this on Facebook, you'll see if it showed up or not. I'm not trying to glue it together. I'm just trying to do something to make that crack a little more visible for you. Right there. All right. So yep, we could do our acrylic magic patch for sure. All right, that is fun. I had a ball with this piece. Now again, what am I going to do? I'm going to take and put this piece in a paper bag. There's my chuck key over here. I still haven't cleaned up the studio from the woodworking shows. I was going to be tearing it apart, but I stayed up north. I didn't get out of town until later last week than I thought. So this will go into a bag and allow it to dry, warp, hopefully not split anymore. But it's a cool looking piece of wood. And let's see, what can we do? Just for fun, let's see if I put some alcohol on this. I've got a little bit here. See if we can get an idea of what the grain might look like. I don't know if I can get enough. I don't know if I can get it wet enough. We'll put the overhead camera on. So you've got some pretty interesting grain there. That gets typically a little more plain. But these fun wavy undulations here are pretty cool. And let's do the same thing with the inside. Let me get a fresh load of alcohol on here. Jim says it looks like oak. Yeah, it's not oak. I know that, Jim. So most of our character is on the outside. Not that there's anything wrong with the inside. Interesting, nice roll in the grain right there on that side and on that side a little bit. So that's pretty cool. And considering what it came from, let's go back and review. It came out of the end of this. This was the end of the log right before what we cut away. And again, there's where the growth rings go. I am pretty certain that that piece I have is this half. That's the blank that we just turned. Art's still campaigning for honey locust. I'll let you guys duke it out. So Dad and I, Billy McAllister and I vote for hickory, and we got one vote for oak. It's not oak. and and one for honey locust. How long am I going to let it dry? Mark, that's a loaded question. I'll probably let it dry for about 5 or 6 years before I get around to messing with it. If I'm being honest. How long will it take to dry? If I do nothing with it, at this thickness, I put it in a paper bag, which is what I'll do. And I put them in there, put the date on, and forget about them. That's how I always did it. But realistically, this will probably be dry at this thickness in 6 months if I don't do anything special to it. If I was to boil it, it will accelerate that. A lot of people like to boil it. It changes the, I believe it's the sugar content in the wood, I think. People soak them in blanks in denatured alcohol. The theory being that the denatured alcohol displaces the water that's in the cells of the wood, and then the alcohol evaporates and dries the wood, and it dries faster. A rule of thumb for that method is an hour per inch thickness of wood for soaking. I have never done any of these other methods. Also, the microwave is another one. You could ask my dad out there about microwaving. I've never been in that big a hurry. I just throw them in a bag and forget about them. And the way I did it for years is I had a whole inventory of pieces. So I would go buy a log from the log yard, and I would rough turn, 20 of these things a day. I'd go cut the log, I'd cut my 20 blanks or whatever, and I'd go in and rough turn them, put them in a paper bag, put them up on a 4x8 sheet of wood in the rafters. Yes, I put them in the rafters and where it was hot, and put them in a paper bag, and did 1,000 plus or minus a year, 900 to 1,200, let's say, looking at the records. And if I had a half a dozen pieces split a year, that was probably about average. So my attrition rate was really low. I had done that for a number of years, so I wasn't in a hurry. Particular situation for me, I wasn't in a hurry to get a piece dry, so I never used the other methods. Nothing wrong with them whatsoever. A lot of people use them, they like them, they're happy with it, they want to get the piece done and finished. But for me, I had that cycle to where when I needed another piece for selling at a craft show or putting in a gallery, I would just go up to my inventory and pull out whatever shape that I needed, turn it, and finish the turning on it to its final size, put a finish on it, and off it went out to be for sale. And when I did the rough turning, I turned all different shapes and sizes. So out of that particular log, I would process bowls, vases, vessels, hollow forms, plates, platters, big, small, boxes. I'd create a whole bunch of rough boxes. So I had a whole cross section of all the shapes and sizes, and then I'd put them, let them dry. So again, it took a year or two, actually about 3, really, to get it built up well. And so I would be grabbing pieces that had been up there for a couple of years, maybe. So that's why, Mark, I say, well, if I'm honest, and especially with my schedule now, when will I get back to turning this piece? Ain't no telling, It'll be another piece in a bag, in a box, hanging around. But if you wanted to turn it, I would say, and now this piece is pretty wet too, but 6 months, and it should be pretty dry. The other thing you can do, and I have done this before, if I was in a hurry for a particular piece, I might keep turning it. I might turn it every couple of weeks and take another little bit off of it. I would turn it back to round every couple of weeks. And by the time a combination of drying and being turned to round, it would end up in its final shape and dry more or less at the same time. That was another technique that I would sometimes use and try. And it seemed to work pretty well. Just take a little bit more off, take it back into shape. So I didn't have to re-round a really oval piece. I kind of kept up with it. So there's a lot of different ways to go about getting the piece dry and how long it takes. And different species of wood take longer to dry. And again, it depends on how thick the piece is. This is a small piece, so the walls are fairly thin. If it was a big piece and the wall was 1.5 inches thick, it's going to be a whole lot longer. Standard rule of thumb for wood drying, air drying is a year per inch, give or take. So somewhere in that realm. And of course, if you're here in South Georgia, probably double the time. If I was in Arizona or Colorado, Mark, where you're at, it'd probably dry a day after tomorrow if you put it in a paper bag, because you got like no humidity. So let's see, how are we doing on time? About 10 till, 8 till. So I had fun today. I hope you picked up some tips on dealing with these kind of crazy pieces. It's fun to turn. A lot of people would run from a piece that looked like that. Again, when I show you this piece in the overhead, would you go to the store and pay $60 for a blank that had that kind of character and stuff in it? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad piece of wood. It comes with its own challenges. And also you get your own unique rewards for working with a piece like that. Okay? I'm free for questions. If anybody's got any more questions, fire them in there. Thank you, Wendy. I had fun. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Art, you're not going to give up on the locust presentation, are you? Okay, Art, I'll tell you what. I'll come up with a word for it. We'll call it lickery, or something like that, or hocust. Maybe that's it. It's hocust wood. Art's a trip. Have fun with it, Art. I'll send you a piece in the mail. Send me $25 for shipping because it weighs a ton, and I'll send you a piece up, and you can determine if it's locust or not. I had a great time, folks. I hope you did too. Let's see. What's coming up? Next week, I think I'm gone. No, I'm here next week. I should be. Hopefully I can get things changed around in here. I hope to start doing the live videos, the live product videos, filming out here. You'll keep your head or eye to the screens and all that. I'll be out here during the week, and I'll just announce them, and then I'll be live doing the product videos. Some of you know that. If you're not aware, I'm going to be making product videos for Spirecraft's website for all the products we carry, and I've decided to do it in front of a live audience like this so that I have some interaction. If there's something that I'm not talking about in a tool, I'll get that feedback. And I'm also super comfortable talking to you guys, talking to the camera when there's people here, and when there's nobody here, it's just me in that box. I don't do nearly as well. So look for those coming up in the Spirecraft feed or in the Monday Methods Wood and Resin Turning Group feed, the announcements there. And they might be short notice. You just have to see that I'm on. But I encourage you to come out and join me. And I'm going out of town, I think, the next week for vacation, anniversary, going to go away. And then we're going to have a event for Spirecraft for the new site, hopefully around the end of April. That's my goal. Looks like it might get pushed into May a bit now, but lots of fun things coming up with Spirecraft as well. And I don't know, I'm having a ball. Summertime's coming, the world's opening back up, SWAT's going to happen. There is life after pandemics, so things are looking up. Everybody, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody coming out. Again, I hope you picked up some tips. If you have questions, you know how to get a hold of me, info@Spirecraft. Message me on Messenger from Facebook. And any of those things, smoke signals, carrier pigeons, whatever it takes. Off topic, do I know an outlet for small burls? Yeah. Matter of fact, I got some in the office I need to bring out here. Two Boys Wood. Elizabeth Ross, she goes and gets burls, and she does special order. You can pre-order. She just did one, but Two Boys Wood, and you'll find her on Facebook, Instagram. She's great. She's in Atlanta, and she's got sources there for lots of wood. She is, kind of become a resource for turners, and it's her and her sons, her young sons. They're in their early mid-teens now, so great cause to support, help them with their business. I know they're another small business trying to make something happen. Yeah, Two Tree Boys. I always kind of get it confused. I had her one son several years ago now do his first demo when he was 12 at the woodworking shows, and he turned a pen, guest regional demonstrator. He did great. He's been turning ever since, so I'd like to try and help them out whenever I can. I don't buy a lot of burls because I'm cheap, but I did buy some Mali burls from her, and I just need to, they're for Resin Project. But check her out. Check that out. Two Tree Boys for your wood there. All right, gang. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the little outdoor chainsawing. It was nice and fun to get outside and add a new dimension to things. I'm always trying to find things that help show what we do or what we need to do the best I can. And at that, I'm going to go to an overhead of this crazy piece of wood and say good day, and I will see you all next week. Thank you very much.